right. I am not going to say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube because I want you to get the chance to hear this excellent interview with Mike Rowe. He is, I hardly have to introduce him. He's a TV host, writer, narrator, producer, actor, spokesman, rose to national fame with his hit show Dirty Jobs on the Discovery Channel. He participated in all sorts of jobs from Batcave scavenger to maggot farmer. He launched Mike Rowe Works in 2008. Which is designed to reinvigorate the skilled trade. And Mike is currently working on a number of different projects, including his show Somebody's Got to Do It on TBN, at Returning the Favor on Facebook, and The Way I Heard It, which is Mike's weekly podcast. He is just a really good guy and a really good presence, I think, in the media. And here is my interview. Oh, before I say, well, I'll talk to you about when I get back. Here's my interview with Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm sorry it's taken so long.
No, yeah, we've never met in person, but I know you came in to the Daily Wire once when I wasn't here, and I had to listen to the women talk about how good looking you were for like 5 days. Believe me, I was completely sick of
it. There's no accounting for taste, Andrew, but nevertheless, I'm nothing but grateful.
We only let women here who have poor taste because otherwise they wouldn't work with us. So you've got this show that is an unbelievable phenomenon, this Returning the Favor. It's gotten, gets millions and millions of hits, and it's beginning its second season on Saturday, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of stuff. Returning the Favor is this Facebook thing, and I don't even think they're in a world of seasons. They just keep ordering them, and we keep shooting them, and every week a new one pops up. This Saturday is a show that I really didn't think was ever going to see the light of day again, called Somebody's Got to Do It. And years ago, I got it on CNN of all places. I needed an hour of prime time somewhere, and they had it. And I thought, maybe a lighthearted show about normal people might work over there, but it didn't. So I took the show back, and that is debuting this Saturday over on TBN in what can only be the weirdest evolution of any television show in the history of broadcast.
Well, you got kind of attacked for this, didn't you? I mean, they were saying you shouldn't be on TBN, and Mike Huckabee was introducing it, and they didn't like that. I mean, this kind of became almost controversial.
Well, it did, but in the exact same way that it was controversial on CNN 3 years earlier. The problem is, as you know, being a keen observer of our deeply schizophrenic culture, it's not enough to have an opinion that may or may not find traction in the mainstream or the intellectual dark web or wherever you happen to be. We're judged today not for what we say, but for whom we're sitting next to when we say it. And so, I've got 4 or 5 million friends on my Facebook page, and when I put a show on CNN, many of them needed to explain to me why they could never bring themselves to watch the show because it was on a network they had sworn to never see. And likewise, when it goes on TBN, all my buddies on the left come over to say, listen, you're great, love your foundation, love what you do, but we really can't watch that network because, it's on our list of thou shalt nots. And so a couple of years ago, we went on Glenn Beck and then Bill Maher within the same week, and people's heads exploded, not because of anything I said, but just because I was sitting next to the wrong guy. That's the world we're in. I'm used to navigating in it now, but it did take a while, which is a long way of saying, yeah, I got a lot of heat, not for the show I was doing, but for the place I put it.
But this is you hold a unique position in this way. I mean, I can't think of anybody else who does this. You represent certain basic, what I would hope were close to universal American values, the values that I would think almost every American, if you asked them, would hold to. Obviously, there's no value that everyone would, but a lot of them, a majority of people. And yet you managed to stay unpolitical. Do you do that on purpose?
Well, I have opinions, and they're pretty obvious to anybody that wants to peel back the layers, but I never lead with them. And if I'm in a situation where I'm inclined to persuade, or at least try to persuade, I've learned that you really can't do it by putting on your Make America Great hat or whatever whatever the corresponding bit of wardrobe is on the other side, because we're all in our uniforms and we've all taken our sacred vows and we've all clearly identified our enemies. So to your point, what's really interesting today, at least from a rhetorical standpoint, is to look at basic themes that are universal. You're absolutely right. Dirty Jobs was a rumination on the universal decency of work. Somebody's got to do it is a rumination on the universal importance of passion within your vocation or your avocation. Returning the favor is a rumination on the universal ideas of decency and basic kindness. And if I can stay focused on the underlying themes of any of these projects, then I'm in pretty safe territory, because all I'm really trying to do is look for people with whom I might disagree politically, and without turning it into a polemic, find out how and maybe why we do still have some things in common with regard to those big, broad, epic themes that I still believe make us more similar than different.
Well, that is another thing I wanted to ask you about. I mean, you get out a lot and you meet a lot of people and you meet all these different kinds of people. And as you say, you talk to people on both sides. I always have this sense, obviously we all talk about how divided the country is, but I have this sense that a lot of these divisions are in the media, not on the street. And I would like to hear what you think of this, that ordinary people, I always feel like 70% of ordinary people probably agree about 70% of the stuff. And yet on TV, all we hear is the most extreme things. Am I wrong about that?
Well, I'm not an expert, but from what I've seen, there's not a lot of money in violent agreements. There's money. There's money in conflict. There's money in tension. This is not a new idea. We all know if it bleeds, it leads. We all know that, to get somebody's attention, you need to shake them by the lapels. Dirty Jobs had big, giant themes and agendas in it that were important to me, but nobody wants a lecture. So the only way I could get you to watch that show was to have a toilet explode or go through some highly detailed misadventure in animal husbandry, right? I mean, we had to do things to get your attention. The problem with the news, in my view, and with a lot of what passes for discourse today, is that we don't have anything underneath the puerile. We don't have anything underneath or beyond the conflict. So all that's left is a ratcheting up of rightness and wrongness. And so, look, my pitch for Dirty Jobs, somebody's got to do it, the way I heard it, and Returning the Favor was identical. Over the last 15 years, every show I've ever sold is me sitting across from an executive and saying, for the love of God, isn't there enough bulging veins and spittle flying through the air and Strom and Drang in my newsfeed? Isn't there enough in yours? What can you find a half hour or an hour where we can focus on the 70% you're talking about, and where we can maybe smash together the Venn diagrams of opposing ideologies and focus on that which is somewhat comparatively common? And if the answer is yes, then I come up with a new title and go about the business of producing the same damn show I've been doing for 20 years.
It's funny because it's amazingly successful. And you'd think, I always wonder about this. You'd think everybody would be imitating it, but they go back to the screaming and yelling because they know it works to the level that it works, and they don't want to push it up beyond that. But even so, even the fact that you're representing basic work ethos, some would say a blue collar ethos, but you've even been attacked for that. At one point they said somebody started in on you about the fact that, well, because you're blue collar and you represent blue collar work ethos, you're a white supremacist. How do you reply to people like that?
Well,
I know.
Look, me and that guy having a beer would have a very different conversation with regard to your question than I'm going to have on a Facebook page where I know 5 million people are watching. That, for me anyway, is an example of where I would rather persuade than respond. So it forces me to think, and it forces me to consider the essence of cognitive dissonance and the basic tension that's forcing people into this crazy us or them, black or white, sort of bifurcated choice. Blue collar has become code for something. Actually, it's become code for a lot of things. And amazingly, white supremacy is one of the things. Uneducated is another thing, right? So the language is being tortured and twisted to reflect the same divisions that currently exist in 2018. So all kinds of words have become, I was going to say triggered, but now I realize that, the word trigger is a trigger.
Even that's a trigger, yeah.
Right. If you say trigger, you're going to trigger people who actually suffer from real triggers, and those people, et cetera, et cetera. So, the language is a fascinating thing, and I know you've spoken a lot about it, and I really appreciate the fact that you do, because I think it informs every single debate that's going on, from higher education to alternative education, from blue collar to white collar. The minute we assign or over-assign value to a term, we just open the door for all the other attendant terms. And now pretty soon each side has their own language. I don't even know what safe spaces mean anymore. It used to mean like, yeah, I would like to be in a safe space if I'm trying to write or if I'm trying to live. But now the last thing in the world I want is to be associated with a safe space, because to me it's come to represent a kind of cowardice and a kind of narrow-mindedness. So yeah, we're in a giant rush to redefine words that I always thought I understood. So to answer your question, what I say to that guy is I say, look, man, the evidence demands a verdict. And now we can have a conversation with 5 million people listening. Persuade me, or at least make a cogent case that my predilection for skilled trades is in some way contemporaneous with your assertion that I'm a cross-burning white supremacist. I'm all ears. I'm listening, but I'm just not being persuaded. So, that's how you deal with them. You ask them straight up to respectfully make their point. Let the audience judge.
My last question, because I'm running out of time, but I feel that there's so many people whose livelihoods depend on making us feel that we are racially divided, sexually divided. And yet, in my personal life, when I look around, I don't find most of the women I know are screaming about men and how awful they are. Except I live in Hollywood, so some of them are. But like most of the women I actually know aren't like that. And when I meet people of every single color, and one of the things I love about this country is that we're all such mutts and we all look different and everything. But I don't find this to be true. And when you are going out and you're talking, obviously, to people of all colors, do you find this racial animus actually does infect as much of the country as it seems to?
For me, my foundation is called MicroWorks, and I called it that because literally MICRO, small works, and then Bill Gates was going to sue me, so we changed it to Mike Rowe, my name, which is okay. Individuals. Right. Yeah. I deal with one person at a time, Andrew. I mean, obviously I broadcast, but to your point, if you get a group of people together, their opinions are going to change and morph into something very, very different than I've experienced one-on-one. It's the thing that I think is most fascinating in the country right now of all of the divides. It's not the divide that's purely ideological. It's what happens to an individual who gets in a group, because a group is a click closer to a crowd, and a crowd is a click closer to a mob. And there's nothing more threatening to democracy than a mob. We are essentially dividing ourselves into two giant mobs. So the individual's getting lost. I've never found a man or woman who can't sit down and agree with me, for instance, that the differences we seem to be so frightened of are in fact the things that make life so worth living. Ultimately, no individual has ever disagreed with me when we've had a chance to really talk through what that means. Put them in a group, conversation's over, party's over. A party line is drawn, morals and dogma are clear, we take up sides, and the next thing you know, blue collar means white supremacist, and back down the rabbit hole we go.
Right. Mike, what's the easiest way for people to find you?
I hate to say it, but Facebook is pretty well ubiquitous. I'm there all of the time, but you can also go to mikerowe.com and, click on links, and there I am. It's like stepping in gum, Andrew. There's no getting away from me.
Mike Rowe, you're doing a great job. I appreciate your coming on. Thanks very much.
I so appreciate the invitation. Have me back sometime in person. I love what you're doing.
Thanks a lot. I will do it. No question.
You bet.
All right. Really, just a unique figure at the moment in the culture. He's doing a terrific job.